please feel free to keep sending in those introductions in the chat. I know a bunch of them are coming in. We have a few more people joining, but we have a lot to cover today, and we're really excited. This is the second time we're giving this webinar, and we were really just kind of excited and inspired by the conversations last week. So not to oversell it, but we're excited to get to know all of you, and for the conversations that we're going to have on today's webinar on embedding evaluation in your city. So let's just go ahead and dive in here. So a warm welcome to everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Erin Britton. I'm a senior advisor at the Behavioral Insights team. I'm co-leading this webinar with my colleague, Kelsey. Kelsey, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Kelsey Goen. I'm an advisor here at the Behavioral Insights team, and I work on our What Works Cities program with a lot of cities across the US. So excited to talk to all of you today.
Wonderful. So before we jump in, I feel like most virtual meeting rules and norms are second nature to all of us at this point. But just to do a quick recap of what we've found to be useful. Everyone right now has been muted, I believe, as they've joined the call. So just as best practice, feel free to keep yourself on mute when you're not actively contributing. We'll have lots of breakout sessions during today's webinar. So in those, definitely feel free to unmute yourself, or if you have any clarifying questions during the course of the webinar, definitely just take yourself on mute and throw those out to the group, or make liberal use of that chat window as well. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Next, if you are able to, and it's a reasonable time zone for you, please feel free to keep your camera on. We love to sort of have that interaction, especially since we'll be having some small group conversations as well. And next, if you have a question, as I mentioned, definitely use that chat box to jump in there with any clarifying questions. We'll be checking it and monitoring it as we go, but we also have kind of a section for Q&A at the end of today's session. So as questions come up to you, definitely feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll make a note of them. And if we don't cover them during the session, we'll be sure to return to them at the end during that Q&A and make sure that we get to all of those questions by the end. Also, feel free to react to what others are saying. We're going to ask you to share a little bit, and we'll be calling on some folks to share from their experience. Feel free to interact both through reactions, through the chat, whatever feels comfortable to what folks are saying. And finally, if you have any technical difficulties, definitely use the link in the invitation or the email to just rejoin the session. If we're in a breakout room, we'll make sure you get sorted back into your breakout room as well. And if you're having any video or audio issues, just let us know, drop us a line, and we'll do our best to troubleshoot for you. All right, so we're going to jump in today to what we're really going to be talking about in this What Works Cities webinar. So for those of you who are a little bit less familiar or a little newer to What Works Cities, a couple of words of introduction. What Works Cities, or WWC, as you'll see it referred to throughout this presentation, is an initiative that supports cities to build their capacity to use data and evidence. The Behavioral Insights team, or BIT, is one of the What Works Cities partner organizations, and our role in the What Works Cities is really to help your city grow its evaluation skills. So we're a partner. We have worked across lots of different cities. But this is really our role that we kind of focus on, supporting evaluation capacity building. That's one of the elements we really focusing in on today within the What Works Cities world. So at BIT, we've worked with over 67 cities through the What Works Cities program over our 5 years of being involved since 2015. And we've been partnering with these cities, teaching them how to run over 120 different evaluation projects. So these projects have covered areas from sustainability to code enforcement, revenue collection, civic engagement, public health, waste management, as well as COVID-19 messaging. So really has run the whole gamut of policy areas that cities have chosen to focus on. And just as a bit of a shameless plug, if you're interested in through the What Works Cities webinar, What Works Cities program rather, learning how to run an evaluation, we do have an evaluation foundations intensive course coming up in March. And that's a time where we walk you through over the course of 10 weeks, the whole process of running an evaluation. So if you have any interest in learning more about that through What Works Cities, let us know, drop myself or Kelsey a line after the webinar, and we'd be happy to provide some more information. So how does What Works Cities help support, provide the environment for cities to grow their evaluation capacity? So there are certain criteria within What Works Cities that really speak to those evaluation competencies, and BIT supports in a variety of different ways cities to meet these criteria. So we've captured on this slide just as a bit of a preview, the kind of main buckets, areas of evaluation in terms of capacity building that we look at, as well as some of the BIT supports that we have. And we'll be spending a little bit more time later in the webinar kind of going through this more in detail, talking about some of these supports. But I did want to mention also that as part of this webinar, we will be offering companion coaching sessions to any city who wants to participate. So if you have questions following today's webinar, if you're interested in learning more, talking more about how this you can apply it in your city, talking more about these evaluation criteria, you'll have the chance to sign up for a quick kind of informal coaching call with myself or Kelsey, and we'll be able to talk through that as well. All right, next slide. So the main motivating question of today's webinar is really about how do we bring evaluation into the fabric of our city. So running evaluations is great. It's what we want to do. It's the work. But what can we do beyond running individual evaluation projects to make sure that evaluations really become embedded within our cities, within the fabric of our cities? So to talk a little bit about what this embedded evaluation model looks like, we're gonna use a bit of a metaphor. So I'm gonna move us to the next slide here. We can think about embedded evaluation as a healthy, vibrant ecosystem. This is our beautiful ecosystem photo here. And for every city who's thinking about embedding evaluation in their city, it's really important to understand your why, to set your goals for evaluation. And what does that healthy ecosystem look like in your city? Maybe it's that all of your programs are evidence-based. Maybe it's you want them to be more cost-effective or get more bang for your buck. It's really important for you to set these goals at the outset and use them to guide your efforts, because it's a big lift to embed evaluation within your city. So we'll spend some time thinking about how do we set goals? How do we envision what it means to embed evaluation? How do we build that healthy, vibrant ecosystem? And what does that look like for your city, very specifically and particularly? Once you've set your goals, you can start thinking about building your evaluation team. And that's the next element that we're going to talk about today. Your evaluation team is what connects that ecosystem. So we use this image of the bees, the pollinators. They really connect various different areas, across different policy areas, to support your ecosystem's growth and sustainability. So we'll be talking about how you can build that team of pollinators to connect that ecosystem of evaluation. And so finally, what we'll be talking about is how you, as a person within your city, can help support and enable that team to help you achieve your goals. So just like our friends, the bees, they need our support by planting flowers, creating these pollinator meadows so that they can do their best work. Our evaluation teams are no different. So we'll be talking today in our third module about what you can do to support and provide an enabling environment for your evaluation team to be successful and thereby help you achieve that healthy, vibrant ecosystem of embedded evaluation across your city. So those are our three objectives for today. For the slightly less visual learners among us, we've also listed them out here. But we're going to cover this big question of why do we evaluate? We're going to explore why evaluation is important for cities and do some exercises around setting the evaluation goals for your city. Then we'll move into building an evaluation team for your city, understanding the purpose and role of an evaluation team, and starting to understand what are some of the models of an evaluation team that we've seen work and be successful, and which of those models may work best for your city. And this will tie really directly into the What Works Cities Criteria GM6, which is about creating and establishing an evaluation team. And then finally, we'll be taking a look at how you set that team up for success. What are ways that you can support and resource that team so that they can do their best work? And that'll really tie in to the What Works Cities Criteria EVAL 2, which is about evaluation tools, methods, and resources. So that's a quick overview of what we're hoping to cover today. Next slide here. Oh, and so with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Kelsey to dive into our first module, Why Evaluate?
All right. Thanks, Erin. So first, we're going to kick it off here to discuss why evaluate. And we're actually going to ask you all to reflect a little bit of why is evaluation important to you and your city? So what are, some of the things that you think evaluation can bring, or maybe it's an example of an evaluation you've previously run, but just want to have a little bit of a kickoff here to talk about the importance of evaluation. And you can go ahead and type in the chat window, or if you're feeling brave, you can go ahead and unmute and share. So we'll give you all a minute or so to think about it, and then we can discuss together. Yeah, we've got some comments coming in on asking, how do you know, making decisions based on data, not just a feeling. I think that's definitely important. Of course, communicating, the work of your results to residents and the progress of your work. Yes, data-driven decision making. I'm sure Sarah's all excited to see that being highlighted here from the What Works Cities perspective. These are some really great answers, and I think at BIT, we agree with all of those and more of evaluation being a really powerful tool for cities and something being really important to invest in. We kind of have our three bullet points that we always talk about. And I think that, the things you have mentioned here also definitely feed into these. So first, we think that, evaluations are a really important tool for cities is because as cities, you all have a really important responsibility to provide services for your residents. And oftentimes, resources are limited and every dollar is a trade-off. So evaluations can help you make decisions on which programs to fund, which ones were kind of most effective, and within your programs yourselves, making those even more efficient and better for your residents. So, the kind of, dollar investment trade-off here is a really big way that you can sell evaluation in your city. Next, evaluation can help build an evidence base and continually improve your programs. So by evaluating, by collecting data, by asking structured research questions, you can avoid making the same mistakes over and over again and actually identify where your mistakes are. Beyond that, you can contribute to the kind of broader evidence base of programs. So we're all about kind of, making evidence-based and data-driven decision-making, and actually having the data on your programs can allow you to share your work with other cities and build to that broader evidence base. And then finally, ineffective programs are bad. So of course it's terrible if you're, running a program and might not be having the results that you want to. But sometimes, harmful programs can also exist. And without measuring the outcomes of what you're doing and without really understanding the impacts, you may not even be able to identify these potentially unintentional harmful results. And evaluation can really help you avoid that. So the example I think we think about a lot at BIT is something that a program that was designed with best intentions in mind of, helping discourage teenagers from having kids is maybe you all had the robot baby, or I had at my school in rural Pennsylvania, a bag of flour that you had to take care of for a week. And the point of that program was really to educate people on the responsibility of being a parent. Turns out when that program is rigorously evaluated, actually they find that birth rates increase for teenagers who are enrolled in those programs compared to those who are not. So I think maybe people thought the egg or that robot baby was fun. So, evaluation can really help you kind of understand what's going on and potentially mitigate or avoid some of those effects. So these are the kind of three that we talk about. And I think everything beyond what you listed here is they're all good things. All right. So I'm going to take a little bit of a step back because I think we've got folks that people who've worked with BIT before, maybe people who have run evaluations in their city, but I want to make sure we're all kind of coming in with the same picture of what evaluations can be. At a very high level, I think there's four main components that we talk about for evaluation. So BIT goes deep into detail a lot of times around randomized controlled trials and quasi-experimental methods and all of those things. But at the end of the day, we really mean evaluation as asking specific questions, making a plan to answer those questions, collecting measurements or data to do so, and then finally kind of answering your questions in a structured way. So on today's call, we're not going to just talk about the RCTs of the world, but this is also inclusive of program evaluations, formative evaluation, process evaluations. All of those things can definitely fit into the kind of ideas that we have for you about developing a culture of evaluation, having a team, and some of the tools that we're going to outline. The other misconception sometimes folks have is that evaluations are something that happen at the end of a project. You put all of your work out into the field and you measure the results. But actually, BIP believes that evaluation should be in every stage of the project life cycle. So you should be thinking about your evaluation method as you're planning your program, coming up with that strategy at the beginning and setting goals. From that very beginning, thinking about what is the way to evaluate it? What is that kind of question that you actually want to answer? As you're designing your experiment or as you're designing your program, you also want to be building in ways that you can actually generate the data that will answer the questions that you sent out in your strategy. Finally, for planning and implementation, I think this might be a little bit more kind of familiar or natural here, but actually, not just training folks on the program itself, but training them also to see the value in collecting data and understanding why we might be asking them to do that one extra data point and the kind of value of evaluation there. And then finally, you're evaluating your program once the results come back in and it's out in the field, but you're also using those results as time goes on to continually improve the program and feed back into strategy as you develop whatever that next stage might be. So evaluation is a tool that you can use at any place in your kind of project life cycle. Evaluation is also something that everyone in the city can be a part of. So I was excited to see that we had folks from the Parks Department on, and we had folks from, other departments across the city. But sometimes when we initially talk about evaluation, people think, that's the folks in, performance management, or maybe in the budget office or in the audit office. But actually, we want everyone to be involved in evaluations, and really good evaluations take, the frontline staff's input on what the challenges are, what the problems we should really be trying to address. You've got, of course, the folks in the kind of analyst roles or in the budget office that are helping you maybe with some of the analysis. But evaluations can only go so far if you don't have support from the city leadership to kind of help you champion and move on these results. And then, of course, IT, we work with them in almost every project in order to set things up. So really, evaluations should bring everyone to the table, and there's a place for everyone to be involved. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about embedding evaluation into your city. So there are three areas that we think are important as you're thinking about kind of building this culture of evaluation and actually building the kind of capacity and skills. And we've broken it down into kind of the first step around putting evaluations into practice. So the first step, of course, to having a culture is to kind of light that fire and kind of show proof to people that evaluations have the value and that you can do them in the city. The next piece is around kind of building foundations, so establishing team and tools that actually can help you run these evaluations in your city. And this is going to be the focus of our time today. And then finally, there's the piece around kind of creating institutional structures. So oftentimes it's not enough to just have that one proof of concept project or maybe two. You can have a team and tools in place, but sometimes people leave the city, the mayor changes, you lose enthusiasm. So we would encourage for folks to think about what are ways that you can really take the enthusiasm that you have for evaluations now and put them into policies that maybe are public facing, maybe are internal, but build evaluation requirements in, or thinking about how to embed it into a budget guideline. So that way it stays beyond maybe your time in the city and is not just a one-off. Fortunately, these align directly to the What Works Cities criteria that Erin showed up earlier. So if you are interested or you're at the stage where you haven't yet done an evaluation in your city, that is totally fine. We've got this sprint coming up in March that Erin mentioned, and it's a really good place for you to actually learn what it looks like to run a rigorous evaluation and check off 2 criteria in the process. So we have them, of course, around launching evaluations and then actually using the results, which is the most important part. The next 2 are here on the kind of building foundations for teams and tools. So here we've got one that's focused on, having a designated leader or a team, and then also having standards, methodologies, and tools that support you for evaluation. And then finally, in this institutional structure, we've identified either a policy or a budget as things that will kind of help you reach that goal. In the What Works Cities criteria, at least in my mind, they're kind of helpful guideposts or beacons that you can look to as what good looks like. So I think, we all probably agree that the kind of 3 components are really important, but I think sometimes making the case of why we might need to do this, or what does it actually look like to have evaluation embedded in our city. These are nice kind of hooks that you can guide your teams into, of saying, these are, a best practice that can help us actually achieve this culture of evaluation and actually make it work. And Erin also promoted at the beginning of the call for these policy and budgets. We realize they look different in every city, and of course, every context is unique. So we can help you with one-on-one coaching to really make sure that you're getting what you need from that. All right. So Erin, I think this is back over to you for talking about these different models.
Great, thanks, Kelsey. So as Kelsey mentioned, these 3 areas we see as kind of the fundamental building blocks for building your city's evaluation capacity. And it's really important, as Kelsey was mentioning, with the What Works Cities criteria, they help to sort of give you that guidepost or that beacon of what does this actually look like in practice. The next step in kind of making it real is to set a goal for what it looks like, not in a general sense, but really specifically for your city, to understand what's important for my department, what's important for the people I work with, or for our city's leadership. So we're going to move into our first breakout room exercise. And so what we're going to ask you to do, and Kelsey, if you can move us to the next slide here, is to take a look at these 3 building blocks, these 3 components. They're all important, and to think about which one of these feels like the one that you would prioritize for your city right now. We know that every city joining today is probably at a different place in kind of building their evaluation capacity. Is there one of these that really speaks to you, and one that feels like you want to set as a priority over the next 6 to 12 months? And then from that, once you've identified 1 or 2 of these that you feel like is the right fit, we're going to ask you to think about setting an objective around that focus area. So for running and launching trials or putting evaluation into practice, that could look like saying, we want to use evaluation results to inform decisions about all new programs or all new policies, or we want to rigorously evaluate all pilot programs with RCTs within the first year to determine their impact. And these are just examples of kind of making it really concrete for what it might look like in your city. In building foundations, maybe your objectives are around skilling up your staff, or your objective may be that all staff feel comfortable with and empowered to include evaluation in their program design, or we have a go-to team to support on evaluations. And with institutional structures, your objective maybe about your leadership being bought into the importance of evaluation, or having a budget allocated to support evaluation work across departments. And this is what we're going to ask you to do. Take a couple of minutes, and Kelsey, you want to move us to the next slide here? Take a minute to think about these three components and which one is your priority of the next 6 to 12 months. You may have two. You may be all three, depending on how many folks you have dedicated to this. And then to think and reflect on the question of what's that objective? What's going to look different at your city when you achieve this component? What does success look like for achieving this component? And think about what it means for your strategy and your policy priorities, your internal operations, skills and capacities of your people, your culture, budget, as well as the impact and what's happening out in the community. So take a minute to reflect. You can jot down some of your initial thoughts. And in just a minute, we're going to move everyone into breakout rooms so you can share your reflection with some other folks and hear what they have to say. Any questions on the activity before we get started? Wonderful. So I'm going to go ahead and break everyone into some rooms. And I'll be floating around to make sure if anyone has any questions that I can answer them. So hopefully you have a little breakout room, ask to join notification. Go ahead and click that and you'll be put into breakout room. Oh, Kelsey, could you move back to the prior slide for a moment? Great, thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you had a great conversation in your breakout rooms talking about components and objectives, and we know there's never enough time, but hopefully everybody got a chance to share. So just by way of quick reflection, we're gonna do a quick poll, if you'll bear with me here, to see just from the group, which components was a focus for you. So hopefully you have a poll screen that popped up, and if you can just select your choice, and then I'll share the results when everyone has had a chance to weigh in. All right, last call. Great. So here's how the distribution was. You know, we're numbers people, so we always like to take a look at percentages. And it looks like, you know, it's pretty in line, I think, with trends that we see with cities we work with. Kind of a lot of folks getting that groundwork in about just getting the evaluations, making them happen, running them, launching them. But also a lot of folks focusing on building those foundations, which is really going to be the core of what we talk about the rest of the session today. Putting your team in place, learning how to resource your team, the tools, methods, and resources that you can share. And then also, you know, and sometimes once you have to build that groundswell of support by actually running evaluations and then building the team, making sure that all of that hard work is institutionalized. So we have representation across the board here. So I will turn it back to Kelsey to keep us moving.
Great. All right, so we've talked a little bit about why evaluation is important, and we've shared some of your goals around why you want to have evaluation in your city and how to, what levels you would like to embed it. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how to build an evaluation team and a couple of models that we've seen work. And like Erin said, there's those kind of three components, and we see most cities start at the running evaluation stage just because it's an easy place to jump in. But you can definitely do all three in parallel. And for some cities, after we kind of go through this today, it might actually sound like this is a better place for you to start. So stay tuned in, even if you're really still at that kind of first stage around running evaluations. All right, so why is an evaluation team important? Why can you not just have one person for evaluation, or just have be your evaluators forever? We think there's a couple things that make having a team really vastly important for a city. So one, of course, is the expertise and skills. Evaluations, everyone can participate in them, and I think actually the data analysis skills that are needed are probably lower than some folks might think. But you do need people who have some data analysis skills and also have an understanding of different evaluation methods. An evaluation team can really help bring that across your city. Next, the evaluation team can provide a level of consistency around evaluations. So it's really great to do a lot of them, but of course you want all of your evaluations to be high quality and rigorous and make sure that they truly are measuring the things that you intend to measure. And having a team can make sure that all the evaluations that you do are up to that same standard of excellence. We find in some cities that having a team really enables sharing across different silos. So sometimes you'll have maybe a person who's really great at evaluations and is doing awesome analysis in one department. But if they're just the evaluator for that area, you may not be able to share the learnings that they have to in a department that may be totally different topic area, but facing the same challenge. And having a kind of team that works together can help you really break down those silos and get the most out of your evaluation team. These final two are a bit more kind of internal facing, but having a team really allows you to demonstrate the value of your evaluations. So each evaluation itself hopefully is bringing you value in terms of telling you what program works, or demonstrating that you could save a lot of money by tweaking your process, or deliver even benefits for your residents. But when you kind of pool all of the evaluations together and the work that the team is doing, it really can show you the much larger value and also really help you kind of bring the evaluation in deeper to the city. And then finally, by having a team, you're building a bench. So you have a lot of different people who understand how to do evaluations, feel that they're equally important. And that way, if folks transition within the city or to a different organization, you've still got a group of folks who can run these evaluations. So we think having a team rather than just an individual is a really critical part. So you're probably asking yourself, what does an evaluation team do? I believe you that they're important. And evaluation teams essentially, support departments and city staff at every stage of the evaluation. So they're there to help identify opportunities that might be right for evaluations. They're there to actually design them. Make sure that these are, good, high quality evaluations that you're going to conduct. They help run those evaluations, support, the, city staff who may be on the ground actually implementing. And then finally, they help make a decision around, how to scale, what to use, what you've learned, and actually share those outcomes. There is a person that we haven't mentioned yet, and that is the idea of having an evaluation champion. So you've got a team of folks who probably have these data skills, but another really important, individual to include in this evaluation team, and as you're thinking about bringing evaluation into your city, is the idea of an evaluation champion. And it maybe isn't one person, it's maybe a couple of people in your city. But basically this is a more senior level individual in some sort of centralized office. It maybe in a mayor's office in your city, it might be a manager's office, it might be in an innovation team, but someone who can basically advocate for evaluation and help kind of clear roadblocks and enable the evaluation team to do their best work. So we find that you may be the evaluation champion here on this call. You signed up, you were excited, or you might know someone who could potentially fill this role. But the two really, work together, the evaluation champion and the evaluation team, to support city departments throughout each of these stages. And I'll flash up the way that we see this breaking down. I know this is a ton of text. We'll share these slides after the call. But basically, you can see here that, the evaluation champion at this early stage is, spreading the word, getting, the evaluation team some of their opportunities, brokering these opportunities for the departments. And then the evaluation team really dives in to actually, help refine some of these. Again, at this kind of, design stage, they're, the evaluation champion is really just playing kind of the advocate role. And then the evaluation team really dives in with the team to support that intervention and program design. And then, likewise for the running evaluations and sharing outcomes, they work together. So I'm introducing these folks to you now and these ideas because you'll see them in the different models that we talk about cities can kind of take. So there's 3 different models that we've seen cities take on to bring evaluation work to the broader city departments that they work with. And they're the centralized team, the community of practice, and the partnership model. And of course, these are 3 models that we're going to outline for you, but what's right for your city may be a mix of all 3 or a mix of 2 of them, or maybe not even one listed here. But hopefully these will spark your interest, and we've got some examples of cities that we've worked with that have taken these on. So the centralized model is exactly, hopefully, what it sounds like. So here you've got 1 or more staff that are kind of formally responsible for evaluation work within the city. Oftentimes they sit in that central office, and where that is in your city, of course, will depend, but mayor's office, the budget office, innovation office, maybe a performance management office. And these folks really would run evaluations. They'd be that kind of central conduit for departments, and you'd have that expertise. These folks may, have it as a portion of their job, or it may be their entire job. Some of the benefits of this model is that it really ensures that you actually have that expertise in-house, and you have the bandwidth to take on these departments, because sometimes you might have a person who is an evaluation expert, but they've got to do their day job in addition to this. So this type of model would allow you to have that expertise and bandwidth. Another really great benefit of this type of model is that departments would have equal access to these teams. So you wouldn't necessarily, have a first folk who is embedded in a department. You would have kind of this equal playing field where departments could work with this team independently. Additionally, having a centralized team allows you to have evaluations that span across different departments. So the evaluation team can kind of take that bird's eye view and say, we've got this really great program in Department A, but we've got data that it generates in Department B. So you may be able to get a broader life cycle or answer bigger questions with an evaluation team that can kind of reach across the different silos. And then finally, on the benefit side, we see that this provides this opportunity to have greater alignment to leadership priorities. So if the mayor says, these are my priorities for the next year, the evaluation team can pick their projects and work with departments to actually execute on those. Whereas in the other models that we look at, you wouldn't necessarily have that much alignment. Of course, some of the considerations, some of the cons here is that, this does obviously require higher budget and resource requirements, because you have folks that this is their dedicated job. There is a need for that kind of expertise around evaluation and analysis, and some of that experience. And this may be, finding someone internal and, offering them some training or upskilling, or potentially looking at a new hire. And then finally, with this model, there is something that we see is that particularly if they sit potentially in like a budget or an audit office, evaluation can be seen more as an opponent than a partner. So people might think, you're evaluating my program. If I'm not meeting the benchmarks that I'm supposed to, or having the outcomes that I intend, my funding will be taken away from me, or my program might be cut. And that definitely is something that could happen. But we find that the best outcomes from the evaluations are ones where you find opportunities for, improvement. So I think thinking carefully around, where this sits in your city and how you message and communicate about it can make the centralized model a really powerful tool. But just knowing that, there are, potentially through a centralized model, people may be a bit more afraid of evaluation than excited about it. In the community of practice model, you have a couple of different folks that come together as a network from different departments to function as this community of practice that designs and runs evaluations. They of course are supported by this evaluation champion who is this centralized person that can kind of help connect it and actually establish this team. Usually we find that these are kind of pulled together with a charter or some sort of other organizing document to really organize the work that this team does. And I think we find cities that we work with, this is a really good place to start if you can't get to the evaluation team, centralized team right away. This is a way to kind of build momentum, get folks excited, and have a bit of a more grassroots approach. So I think when I think about cities like Scottsdale or Mesa, they have this kind of community of practice that works together. We worked with folks in Minneapolis to develop a kind of centralized model where they have this kind of evaluation team that sits within their innovation department. And it turns out that even though they wanted to kind of have these centralized folks who are doing the evaluations, they ended up in a bit more of a community of practice model because so many people wanted to be involved. So they still have a couple of folks who run their evaluations, but they've got a lot of people at the table supporting them. So that's a couple of examples of how you can make this work. The benefits of the community of practice model probably are pretty evident, but you've got more staff empowered to run evaluations. So, they're identifying these opportunities. You can get some really interesting projects from, people in different departments that are kind of raising their hands that they want to be evaluated. There's more visibility across the city because you have folks in a lot of different places who are working on this. You can get this kind of diverse set of project opportunities by, it might not be something that's necessarily on the mayor's radar on a more senior staff, but maybe a more junior staff member sees it and thinks that it's, something you should be working on. And it gives you the ability to scale across the city in a way that a centralized model may not necessarily allow you to right off the bat. Some considerations on this model is, of course, there probably will be some capacity building and training required. So staff may not have the expertise and experience at the get-go in order to take some of these things on. And you do need a couple of folks who have kind of the skills and the time. So, training is definitely, probably a requirement here. Vic can kind of send you some suggestions on, self-guided trainings. We've got one on the LMS that can kind of help upskill folks, or we can also connect you to other resources outside of Works Cities with some more in-depth training. Another piece here is that, of course, community of practice, most of the times these are people who are volunteering, coming on their lunch break, maybe, have an hour, a couple hours a month to spare. But oftentimes, we find if day demands ramp up, they lose a little bit of their focus to dedicate to evaluations, and particularly during critical project periods when you're actually putting an evaluation into the field or actually doing that analysis, you do need a little bit more time to dedicate. And then finally, having that strong central evaluation champion is critical to success in this type of model, because they're going to kind of be that North Star that guides all of these folks and really allows them to kind of maintain the momentum. Finally, the last model here is the idea of a partnership model. So this would be one where the evaluation capacity itself sits outside of the city. And this could be in the form of a local university, maybe a vendor that you work with, and they basically are your kind of outsourced evaluation team. You still definitely need to have the evaluation champion, and they become this person who acts as the kind of coordinator and connector to feed in opportunities from departments and actually understand what they're looking to get out of this and feed them over to the partner and make sure that the results then get translated back in. So the evaluation champion in this model, again, is critical. It has a couple of advantages, which may be right. We have a couple of cities that are looking into this because they've got a great community partner from that local university they're already working with to take this on. But there's also definitely some big drawbacks here. So the benefits, of course, are the kind of access to that cutting edge and specialized expertise. They're going to have those skills. They're going to be able to kind of dig into really big data sets and those types of things. They have, the independent perspective and a higher level of objectivity. So if you are looking at doing a, larger scale program evaluation that your city is involved in across many different departments, this could be an opportunity to get an outside set of eyes and really generate some good results. And finally, it doesn't require any hiring or training because these folks are at the university outside of your city. Considerations in this model, though, are that there may be a misalignment of goals. Academics, of course, have their own objectives in terms of publications, things that they may need to research for their institution. And those may not exactly align with what your department needs, and also the timeline that your department may need them in. So academics can be a little bit slower, work on different timetables that may not align with exactly the way your city needs to make decisions. There's risk of potential turnover, losing that partner who may move on to a different university or a different opportunity, the additional cost that would be needed to kind of hire and contract with these folks. And then you, of course, the other two models give you the benefit of having this in-house evaluation capacity, whereas this model does not, because those would be folks would be outside. And here, again, folks may find a model where you have an evaluation team that you have in-house, and maybe you contract for special opportunities as a potential hybrid. All right, so I think we went through most of these on the slides themselves, but basically I think coming down on which model is right for you probably comes into two different areas of considerations. So one is on the resource side, so thinking about, does your city have staff that you're willing to dedicate this, or budget that you'd be willing to invest in building this capacity in your city? And then finally, what scope or reach do you want your evaluation team to have? So the centralized model, you have people already or are able to hire people. The community of practice, you've got people who are willing to dedicate some of their time. And then the partnership model, you have access to that institution and you have budget available to work with them. On the scope and the reach side, the central model allows you to kind of have this centrally directed evaluation function, and strong leadership support can really, allow you to kind of, reach deep into the city and kind of make a mark there. Whereas the community of practice model, it's a little bit lighter. You build your capacities, capabilities over time, starting with simpler evaluations. And it's more of a bottom-up approach, that kind of grassroots idea of, getting people involved, bringing their ideas to the table. And then finally, for the kind of partnership model, if you really do want to do kind of, high quality, potentially complex evaluations in the near term, that may be a good first stop for you. The other two models definitely can produce some of the high quality evaluations. You may just have a little bit of a learning curve, and you may need to build up your own staff's capacity. All right, so now we can think about kind of choosing a model, and we're going to go back to our breakout rooms. And Erin and I will make sure that the questions get put into the chat. But basically think about, what is the model that feels right for your city? Is it one of these three? Is that a combo? Maybe it's something totally different. Who in your city might be able to serve as that evaluation champion? And then finally, do you have people who are currently in your city who could serve on your evaluation team? Maybe it's you, maybe you need to think about hiring new folks. So I'll let it over here to Erin, who can move us into our breakout rooms. All right, I'll put this here.
Oh, it's coming back in. Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Great. So I hope you all had a good breakout room. Kelsey, we're going to do another quick poll. Is that right?
Yes, I think we can do a poll, and then if one person wants to share, I think that's great. Or if not, we can keep moving since we're coming to the end of our time here together.
Great. All right. So hopefully everyone sees a poll. We just, like you, same as last time, based on kind of your conversations, select which of these models you think will work best for your city or is already working for your city. All right, last call. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and share the results. And the winner is, perhaps unsurprisingly, given to the conversations that I was able to listen in on, the hybrid model. I think this is pretty common to have a city start with one and then kind of move to another, as Kelsey was mentioning. And Kelsey, I don't know if you want to offer any reflections from your work with cities on kind of how these models evolve over time.
Yeah, I think hybrid is probably definitely the most popular we see of folks combining either a centralized and community of practice to have a set of specialists who can support a much larger group. And then also I think in terms of the partnership model, that is one where you see a lot of hybrid, where you have a couple of people in-house who are augmented by, that university relationship or maybe a vendor that you work with. So I think those are the two most common combos, but I would not be surprised if there's ones where all three are incorporated. All right. So I will move us right along so we can end here on time, since I know it's at least towards the end of the day for us on the East Coast. So a couple of quick wins that you can be thinking about as you leave today is, set up a potential meeting with that evaluation champion or who you think might be interested in that role and discuss which one of these models is right for you. Also thinking about tapping some team members who might be in that community of practice, who might serve on that, centralized team, and review job descriptions to see if there's any way that you can formally incorporate some of these evaluation responsibilities, or if there's people who actually are already formally responsible for them already. And then finally, identify some training that will send you some resources to upskill staff, and think about a couple of potential quick win projects that you could do with this team. We find that you might have a good model in mind, but until you actually put it into practice doing a project, you might not know exactly what works right for you or what type of individuals that you might want to bring in. Of course, we've got to line this up to the Works Cities criteria. So GM6 is the one that focuses on having an evaluation team. And we've kind of given you a couple of ideas here on a checklist on if you're ready to kind of cross off this criteria on your journey to Works Cities certification. So, thinking about, do you have someone in your city or several people potentially who are responsible for evaluations? Do you have it documented in their job description? And do you have some sort of resource or communication about how different departments and city staff can actually work on evaluations in the city? All right, so Erin's going to take us home here with how do you set this team up for success?
Great, thanks, Kelsey. So yes, our third and final module, shorter but still really important. And what we're going to close on today is, what are the things that you can put in place as you're starting to build this evaluation team and this evaluation function to make sure that they're set up for success. So we have three main areas that we like to talk about. If you want to move us to the next slide, Kelsey. That we think are absolutely critical. So these are kind of three things that you can think about as you're building your evaluation team. So I'll say a little bit about each of these. The first is that it's really important to know how to make sure that everyone knows, that not just you, to make sure that everyone knows how to engage with your evaluation team and how your evaluation team is supposed to work with all of the departments in your city, depending on which model you have. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Second area, and one that I know has come up in some questions, it's about creating and sharing evaluation standards, tools, and resources. So this has two parts to it: making sure that those standards, tools, and resources exist, and also making sure that people know how to use them. So we'll share some kind of tips, tricks, and best practices on that as well. And then finally, this is really important, building, it's all important, but sometimes this is overlooked, building buy-in through sharing wins and insights from evaluation. So we'll also share some tips on how you can make sure that you're not the only one who cares about evaluation in your city. So how do you share out what those wins are, and how do you make sure that the insights and what you're learning from evaluation continues to feed into the work that you're doing? So we're going to talk very briefly about each of these and share some best practices. So we're going to move us ahead here. So as I mentioned, engaging with your evaluation team is a really important area where you can provide structure that helps set your team up for success and helps set your city up to take the most advantage of your evaluation team. So it's really important for this to be bidirectional. So your evaluation team knows how to and is empowered to connect across departments, no matter what model you've decided on, whether it's centralized, whether it's community of practice, whether it's something in between. But also that departments who may be interested in evaluation or in learning know how to get in touch with your evaluation team. So a couple of tips and tricks for this, if you want to move us to the next slide here, Kelsey. Thanks. It's as I mentioned, we kind of separated in these two areas. So developing a process is really critical in both of these. So make sure that folks know what they're supposed to do and feel empowered to do it. It doesn't sort of fall through the cracks. So it's important to develop a process for departments to be able to request support from your evaluation team, whether you're in a centralized model or a community of practice model. And this can be something as simple as a survey or a designated email inbox. It can be kind of more sophisticated, like a ticketing system, or just a Google form that departments can use to say, hey, I'm interested, here's kind of what I'm working with. It's also a good practice to designate an intake person on your evaluation team to be that first point of contact, to be that kind of open door for departments to walk to request support from your team. It's also equally important, as I mentioned, to develop a process for the eval team to connect with departments. And there are a couple of different ways that you can do this. One effective strategy is to have a sample project plan or process flows that include an evaluation component. So when projects are being developed, it's very easy for the team developing that project to see how evaluation can be incorporated in from the very beginning of that project. Another simple kind of quick win is if you have standing meetings in your departments, include evaluation project calls as a standing agenda item in those meeting agendas. So if you have meetings, they're kind of at all hands or sharing across the department, see if anyone has any interesting ideas and have a representative from your eval team there, or make sure that they have the contact information. So a couple of kind of tips and tricks to help make sure that everyone knows how to engage with your evaluation team. So the next area that we want to talk about, we're going to move to the next slide here, is creating tools, standards, and resources. So evaluation can be a very technical thing. It doesn't have to be, but there are a lot of different ways, a lot of different evaluation methodologies, and a lot of different guidance that's out there that it's important to make sure that you have access to, so you're continually having these tools at hand. But I really want to emphasize that you shouldn't feel like you have to create these from scratch. There's so many things out there, and it's important to customize them and make sure that they work for your city and your city context and the types of evaluations that you want to do. But the most important thing is to take advantage of what's out there. So we have a list here up on the screen of example standards, tools, and resources across the life cycle of an evaluation, from identifying opportunities to designing your evaluations, actually running them, as well as sharing those outcomes and scaling the results. And so these are just some examples. There's a lot of tools that fit in this category, but any of the ones that have asterisks by them are ones that BIT can provide templates for. And in coaching, we can help you customize what some of these look like. And we will also be able to point you in the direction if any of these are kind of calling your attention, point you in the direction of where you can access some other resources that can help you build your toolkit. So having the tools is one thing, but the most probably important part is making sure that folks can access that. So if you want to go ahead and move us to the next slide here. So what we recommend to make sure that everyone can take advantage of all the great tools that are out there, it's two things. The first is to create a central and easily accessible location for those tools and resources to live. You can think of this kind of as your toolbox. A best practice here is to use something that people are already using. So if you have a shared drive or an internal wiki or some place that people are already going to for knowledge management or to access information, see if there's a way that you can work maybe with IT to integrate your evaluation tools and resources in that existing system. So yeah, this can be a knowledge base. There's some really great kind of free tools out there to organize knowledge, or have something on your shared drive if you have one in place. And the second part of this is to make sure that people know that these tools exist and how to use them. So providing training, workshops, and communication to keep people in the loop about all of these tools and resources. So you can schedule opportunities to share pertinent resources with departments, show them how they can make use of them. And we typically recommend small, continuous trainings over time versus sort of one big information dump that can be kind of information overload. People will say, well, I kind of remember that, but it was just too much the time to take in. Having small continuous trainings also allows you to share updates as you're continually updating your resources. So to hopefully continue to build interest among the departments in evaluation. It's also a great way to establish those ongoing touch points with folks who are interested in evaluation or who may be developing an interest in evaluation to collect their feedback. What's working? Are these tools helpful? What's not helpful? What can we change? And making sure that you're building a system that really works for the folks who are going to be engaging in these evaluations and supporting these evaluations. And then finally, it's important to discuss with managers or HR how you can incorporate a tour of your evaluation tools and resources in your onboarding process. So as new people come into your city and are hired, how you can make sure that they're aware of the evaluation infrastructure that's being built and that they can take advantage of it if it's relevant to their role. And some of what this looks like and what you decide to do, it will depend in part on which model you decide to adopt for your city, and you can customize some of these, tips and tricks to the model that you decide to move forward with. Right. And finally, our third piece of wisdom, it's really important, as I mentioned, to share your wins. The place that you don't want to be is having you be the only person who cares about evaluation in your department or at your city. So there's a few different ways that we can recommend sharing wins and insights to build that buy-in and to build that groundswell of support for evaluation. The first is to network and learn from the experience of other cities. So, we can exchange the contact information if you chatted with somebody and you want to learn more in today's call. But there's the What Works City network is a fantastic place to kind of share and learn from the experience of other cities, find out what worked well, what didn't work so well, find out about interesting trials that you might want to replicate in your city. So networking, learning, and connecting with other cities is a great way to kind of learn from the insights that other cities have established, and to also bring kind of lower risk projects to your city. Secondly, a great first step that you can take is to conduct low cost proof of concept evaluation projects. And what these are sort of nimble or low cost evaluation pilots. And this is something that BIT can help with. This is exactly what we do during our Evaluation Foundation Sprint course. So let us know if you're interested. But what these let you do is to run evaluation projects in a non-resource intensive way to show what you can do with evaluation and kind of prove that concept. And the history of BIT is actually a great example of this. BIT was established originally with a 2-year sundown clause. We had to kind of prove our salt within 2 years. So we focused in our early years on projects that were really revenue generating. So tax compliance, for example, not maybe the most exciting or interesting for some, although we do have a lot of geeks on staff. But what this allowed us to do is really quantify the return on investment from our evaluations in a very cut and dry way. And that's a great way if you have some hard sells that you're trying to make, to be able to have that quantified ROI from these low cost evaluation projects. And then finally, work with your communications person or department to have a plan to share the findings with any and all evaluations that you do with all of the stakeholders that are involved. So sometimes we focus a lot on communicating a project success with the general public, but we don't do as well with building the buy-in internally about what went well with the process, how can this be replicated? And sometimes it's vice versa. We share things internally, but we don't communicate the insights that we've learned with the general public. So where appropriate, figure out a communications plan that hits on all stakeholders, and make sure that you involve your communications folks early on so they can help tell the story of your evaluation work. All right, so I think we are moving to our close here in our wrap up. But I just want to connect what I mentioned with the What Works Cities criteria. So if you're looking to make some progress on the Eval 2 criteria, which is all about evaluation tools, you can, this is a quick checklist, as Kelsey mentioned, we'll be sharing these slides, but you can check to see, have you documented a process for how staff can engage with your evaluation team? Do you have a document or guide that helps your staff understand what good evaluation looks like? Do you have a centralized repository of tools that can help folks run evaluations? Do you have trainings for staff to grow their evaluation skills, understand how to learn and use those tools? And is there a location or forum where staff can share the results of their evaluation? So these are some of those items, related to what we were talking about that can help you advance towards that evaluation 2 criteria. All right, so just to wrap us up here, we covered 3 main things today. We looked at why do we evaluate? We did an exercise around setting our evaluation goals, kind of thinking about an embedded evaluation as a healthy, vibrant ecosystem and understanding what does that mean for your city? Well, how is that going to help you move where you want to go? And how will you know when you've got there? What does success look like for you? Then we dove into the heart of today's session about how to build an evaluation team in your city, understanding the purpose and the role of your evaluation team and what model might work best for your city, is currently working for your city, and what that might evolve to look like in the future. And then finally, in this last section, we took a look at how you can best support, resource, and set your team up for success. So it looks like we have a couple of minutes for Q&A, but we just wanted to give some next steps, things you can do in the next 24 hours. Hopefully you were excited by this webinar. You have some ideas percolating from the breakout sessions on what you want to do. But what you can do in the next 24 hours is sign up for coaching. Coaching, as I mentioned, is really a chance to chat informally with Kelsey or myself about anything that we talked about today, or if there's something that we talked about and you're like, that didn't make any sense to me, that's a great opportunity to set up a coaching call. We can go through it. Or if you're just sort of struggling with where to start, that's what coaching is for. So please visit this link. We'll send it in the chat right now, as well as via email, and you can book some time with us. In the next 2 weeks, check out the Eval 2 and GM resources that BIT has. We'll also be sending those out via email after this session. You can identify, hopefully, and meet with your potential evaluation champions in your city, meet with the BIT coach if you're having trouble identifying an evaluation champion, or you just want to chat through any of the things that we talked about today. All right, so that is it for us. We have some upcoming opportunities. We'll be spreading the word via email. If you're interested in engaging with any of these opportunities, feel free to drop us a line, and we'd love to chat. So in our last couple of minutes, we will turn it over to any questions that you have. Feel free to drop them in the chat box, or just take yourself off mute and ask your questions.
Hey, this is Chattanooga. We've done several BIT trials and things. Question about we do evaluations all the time in a very unscientific, non-rigorous way, constantly doing these experiments and asking things. So there's a lot of support for that. The more rigorous scientific approach, not as much. Any advice for kind of getting folks more keyed in on that approach to evaluation as opposed to a more kind of not as rigorous?
Yeah, and I can jump in on this, and then Erin, you can fill in. I think one of the kind of biggest first steps you can take is the idea of introducing some sort of standard protocol or process that you have folks who are running evaluations go through. So of course, there's a lot of different types of evaluation methods, but I don't know if you remember from some of the things you did with BIT, but there was a document that basically laid out what your research questions were and asked really critical questions about the data along the way. And that's something that we found that can add a lot of structure to even something as simple as a process evaluation of just thinking about what you're measuring, why, and what the reliability of that data might be. So I think that would be a good place to step, thinking about bringing some rigor to your evaluations. And then also, I think just educating people on what types of evaluations actually require in terms of the analysis and expertise. RCTs are actually a pretty easy lift and are pretty data lean. And I don't know that people always think of it as their first option. So I think just presenting to people what the different methods are and what they actually entail can be really successful in terms of moving along that spectrum of rigor. I don't know, Erin, if there's anything you want to add in terms of bringing some rigor and process to things.
Yeah, I think you hit the highlights there. I think just to double down, kind of double click on that last point. Sometimes these sort of rigorous or scientific evaluations kind of take on a life of their own in people's minds, and that life involves them being very expensive and something that requires kind of external expertise. And as we're finding, and kind of as we continue to work with cities, that it's not always the case that you can have a pretty high level of kind of rigor or like scientificness to evaluation without having to spend a lot of money and without having to bring on external experts. It's actually something that you can skill up your own staff to lead as well. And so I think that the demystification is a challenge, but it's something I think that can be a first step to being able to answer that question of what really is the best evaluation method that we can use, or the one that's best suited for the questions that we have.
Yeah, I think the idea of having a framework for, it's very meta, evaluating your evaluations. And so where to put it into that makes a lot of sense. And any resources you have there would be helpful.
Yeah, we can shoot over. There's a bunch of evidence pyramids around what are the best type of evaluation. All right. Any other questions? I think Erin and I can hang on for a couple of minutes, but I know we're after time. Yeah, we'll just include that in the pack of resources we send out.
Great. Well, we know we've kept you a little bit over, but thank you again so much for your time today and your engagement. We'll be following up after this with a bunch of resources, as well as a link to the coaching sessions. We'd love to talk to you. We love talking about this. So Kelsey and I will hang on the line for a few minutes in case there are any other questions. But if you have to drop off, thanks again for joining us today. And we really look forward to hopefully speaking with all of you soon.
Thanks, y'all. Really appreciate it.
Nice meeting you all. All right. Cynthia, are you hanging around for a question? Nope. Okay. All right.